Good afternoon, my name's Cindy Brown. I'm a tour guide in Port Sunlight and sometime volunteer there. I really enjoy working and volunteering in the village. Lots of interesting places to see and people to hear about. But the one I'm most interested in is a royal visit that took place. King George V came with Queen Mary in 1914, end of March, and their original purpose for the visit was to lay a foundation stone at the Lady Lever Gallery. Now that wouldn't have taken very long, and they did that at Hume Hall. So if you're coming to visit the village, which is obviously well worth doing, it's on the middle of Bolton Road coming from the A41. Hume Hall is quite a big building. It was also a canteen facility for the women and girls at the factory when the Lever soap factory was open. So they were coming there to lay a foundation stone down where the Lever Gallery would be, by pressing a button, a lever, and that's not a pun, and it would drop the foundation stone into place. Very advanced technology for 1914, I think you'd agree, and you can actually see that contraption they used in the Lady Lever Gallery today. Now when they'd done that, of course it didn't take very long. They'd come by carriage from the Port Sunlight station a few minutes away, and the Queen, Mary, was heard to say, "Now my husband has performed that task for you, one of the things I'd like to do is see inside one of these poky little cottages," I believe she described them as, which of course were the residences for the workers in the village. Now I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be too happy at having my residence described that way. However, the royal couple were also due to take part in another ceremony later on at Birkenhead, about 5 miles away. So the people who were organising the tour got a little panicked because it was already a full schedule. So they dragged them quite regally, I'm sure. Certainly the Queen, I'm not quite sure whether the King attended, but they went straight across the road to the nearest cottage, which I don't think had a name then. It became Royal Lodge subsequently. And when the lady opened the door, it wasn't that unusual for employees to be visited by perhaps the higher-ups in the company or Lever himself, to check how things were going in the rented house and make sure it was all clean and tidy. And sometimes they would even have promotional videos. Not a video, this is a video. They would have promotion interviews in there as well. So when the lady opened the door, she was probably quite surprised to see a queen at the shoulder of Lever. Got invited in, of course. There isn't a record telling us whether she actually was offered a cuppa or not, or accepted. But she certainly went in and had a look round one of these poky little residences, as she described them. Now the lady in question, of course, was really, really proud of this, and they gave her a plaque outside the house. However, the lady in question was of quite small stature, shall we say. She wanted to be out polishing that plaque every day, just in case somebody had missed the fact that royalty had visited. They would see the plaque and they would ask, and of course she would be delighted, plunge into her story. However, she couldn't reach the plaque very easily because she was tiny. So what the authorities did, they put a little plinth outside the front window just to build it up a bit, and she was able to step onto it and polish away to her heart's content. I think it's a lovely story, and you will see what's now called Royal Lodge right opposite Hume Hall, where the royal visit took place. We know this story is true, of course, but it was also verified last year because on one of my coach tours, a gentleman at the back half stood. I thought, well, perhaps he doesn't like the tour or he wants to get off. And he said, no, that was my great aunt blank. And she was tiny. She was only about 4'5" or 4'6". So, of course, it's always nice to have the tales that you tell verified. We knew that anyway, but it was lovely to have the personal touch. So when you come to the village, have a look at the station. They'd built a purpose-built greeting area for the royal couple, so they didn't have to get wet from the train. And that's why it's quite a large station for such a smallish village. And then they were processed by carriage down to Hume Hall, where they performed that task. So that's one of the many stories in Port Sunlight that you will find out if you come, and if you also visit the museum. The history of the village is well documented. And there's a lot of people there to try and bring it to life. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we'd love to see you back in the village soon. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Camilla Cotton and I'm the Visitor Services Team Leader here at Port Sunlight Museum. Welcome to the Edwardian Workers' Cottage. I've chosen to talk about the cottage as I think it's an amazing experience that we have here to offer for the visitors. People love to know and want to see what it was like to live in a typical house in Port Sunlight during its day. So we've been really lucky to be able to have this experience on offer for them. This property was set out in the early 1900s, so the decoration inside has been decorated as closely as it could be to how it once looked. What I love in particular about when the visitors come to visit is instantly when they step inside here, they're transformed back in time. And they have lots of reminiscence, lots of stories that they can relate to from their own personal experiences, especially when growing up through their childhood memories from either once where they lived in the style of house that they were in, or they may have visited their grandparents' homes and at the time they had lots of items that are in here very similar to what we have on show. So we find that it is a very special cottage attraction for people to come in and see because it means a lot to a lot of people. And although I have stories to tell about the cottage and the history about it, I find that people, when they come in, they like to tell me stories and tell me how their experiences were living in a house similar to this. So it's great to be able to share information and learn new things as we go along. So this cottage is the kitchen cottage, and it's one of the smaller properties in the village, as we did have the parlour cottages as well. But as you can kind of see just from this room alone, it is a really good size. It has lots of light that comes in, which is something that visitors love to see, that literally every property when you go in, you see there's lots of light that comes in and there's lots of nice views. There's all nice views around in the village when you look out of the houses. I'm very keen for visitors to come and experience this. And also for like the younger generation, it's completely different to kind of what they're used to now in the modern day world of all the electronics, Wi-Fi, internet. Everything in here is completely stripped back from that. So it's a very different experience. So I think it has lots of different connections for the type of visitor that does come here, and there's something to offer for everybody. So yeah, this is the cottage, which I think is a very special experience that we have here to offer to visitors.
Hello, my name is Heather and I am the Heritage Conservation Officer for Port Sunlight Village Trust. My background is in architectural conservation, planning, and architectural history, and as you might guess, I am passionate about the architecture of Port Sunlight Village.
Hello, my name is Georgia and I studied Port Sunlight for the Civic Award. Since Heritage Open Days is mostly virtual this year, my mum and I are going to take you on a tour around the village.
I am particularly interested in the interaction between built heritage and people, the evolution of society and places over time. History doesn't stop, and neither does good design. Port Sunlight is an undeniably pretty place, designed to inspire productivity, upward mobility, good citizenship, and loyalty. It is also largely intact. Its heritage, buildings, and landscapes remain to inspire visitors and to provide its residents with a gorgeous place to call home. Port Sunlight's integrity is so complete and compelling that people often think that nothing changes in the village. While this is a reasonable assumption, it isn't quite true. I'm standing in the north end of the dell, one of Port Sunlight's 2 registered landscapes. This was originally a deep tidal inlet, one of many that crisscrossed the site when it was first developed. By 1903, there was a very large theatre built on this site. It was demolished in the 1930s because it was no longer cost-effective to run. Try to imagine a very large slate-roofed building here, with a neoclassical entranceway, a proscenium and seating. And now you could perhaps imagine just how much this environment has changed in the past 80 years. Behind me was another big change. In this location here, which is now just a grassy lawn and some seating, adjacent to Unilever's site on Wood Street, there was once a replica of William Shakespeare's birthplace in Stratford-upon-Avon. This too was demolished in the 1930s. Port Sunlight's 900+ listed houses have stood the test of time, retaining their architectural features and character. However, the houses were modified from the 1950s through 1979 to improve them for modern living. These adaptations are largely invisible from the fronts of the houses, but included essential work like modern kitchens in place of range cookers in the lounge and an unheated scullery, 3-piece bathrooms with indoor toilets instead of a copper bath and outhouse. These changes were essential to the sustainability of Port Sunlight, although they didn't use those words at the time. And while we might not agree with their plain aesthetic character, they were effective. Deep tidal inlets cut across the early setting of the village and define the landscape for key roads such as Riverside and Corniche. Where today we have a wide, grassy lawn, historically there was a tidal inlet, quite deep, that ran across the village. There is a stone-built bridge that was completed in 1897, buried beneath Bolton Road. The Bridge Inn, which I'm approaching now, takes its name from that forgotten relic of Port Sunlight's past. A fragment of the bridge, as it was known as Victoria Bridge, remains opposite the Bridge Inn. Roads were narrow, pavements were wider. 2 children's playgrounds were once found in the conservation area, along with a football pitch with changing rooms and spectator seating. These bowling greens were once tennis lawns. The Diamond, Port Sunlight's 2nd registered landscape, was once a level grassy area characterized by alleys of trees, roundabouts and a bandstand rather than the sunken rose garden, art gallery, war memorial and Jubilee Arch we have today. It is a privilege to work for the conservation and enhancement of Port Sunlight's built heritage. We are working hard to preserve it, but also know that the village needs to adapt to meet 21st century demands. From climate change adaptations to telling a more inclusive story about the place and its founder. These challenges inspire us to work towards Port Sunlight's future and how its current and future residents, visitors, and friends will share the conservation area. I wonder what people will think of Port Sunlight in 100 years. Although the museum and tea room are still closed to the public, you can come to Port Sunlight for a walking tour or to take advantage of our selfie trail. Come enjoy the village safely.